Friends, I feel compelled to share something today. I am utterly stunned by your reaction to what started out as one episode. That How to Buy an EV episode has now turned into somewhat of a sub-series within our show here of personal finance focused on how to acquire a vehicle. I had no idea you guys were so passionate about this topic. And if you remember last week, I came out with the what is wrong with buying a car and financing it for 6 to 7 years. And I posed a very personal question in that episode. Yeah, I end all my shows with a question. That's because I want to start a discussion here. But this was the first time that I asked you a very personal question, which was, if you financed a car, what were the terms? And I am stunned how many of you were A, honest, and B, I learned a lot from your comments. Like, there was a range of comments. Like, the first thing, I had no idea how pervasive 0% financing was. Like, I knew it was on offer through a lot of car manufacturers, but they always say it's on offer to just the upper tier of credit. And by judging just from the comments, my guess it's not just the upper tier of credit. And then the second thing I noticed, there were a couple of people that admitted to buying a car with very bad credit and were paying anywhere between 7 and 15% interest. There was one guy, he had bought a 2015 Charger and then rolled negative equity from another Chrysler, a Neon, and he was financing a V6 Charger for like $40,000. Vaya con Dios, man, please get out of that. And then all the way on the other side of the spectrum, there was a guy that just was very honest. He's like, I don't care what I'm paying for a car. So he's paying $2,300 a month to lease for 3 years a 991. Now, you know me, I love Porsches, but $2,300 a month, that's $82,000 after 3 years, not including the tax and fees, and you get nothing at the end of the lease. Now, we're going to get to a lease episode coming up shortly, so let's put a pin in that discussion. But there was one other comment that came up in that 6 to 7 year episode, and that comment was, and I thought it was just brilliant, what would I do if I was starting over again and if I had a $5,000 budget? What car would I buy? And it came in from Rye Cuddles. Rye Cuddles? Very interesting name. By the way, big fan of Ry Cooder if you're into that kind of music. So today, I'm going to answer the question, if I was starting over again and I had a $5,000 budget, what would I buy? Now, in this discussion, we are indeed going to get into the weeds. Maybe not those weeds over there, but we are going to get into the weeds of some great candidates for a car that's in a $5,000 budget. However, before we do that, we need to understand some important principles here. First and foremost, you need to understand your why. You're not buying a $5,000 car because you want one. You're buying one because you have to, because you are making a sacrifice. For example, you are buying a $5,000 car because you want to get through university without any school debt. You're buying a $5,000 car because you want to save money to buy a house. You're buying a $5,000 car because you want to save money to buy your girlfriend an engagement ring. Whatever your why is, you need to be honest with yourself, acknowledge it, so this way when you get to those points, when the $5,000 car breaks down or it gets on your last word or you're sick of driving a hoopty, you can know and look forward and see what the real goal is, and then you can get through this period. And it's not going to be the rest of your life, but you get through this period maintaining your sanity. Then second, and this is where I'm geek out about my Dave Ramsey here, not going to go over this book here, but highly suggest you buy the book, because I want you to understand something here. I'm not telling you this kind of stuff. I haven't shared this information with you now over, 3 episodes because I'm perfect or because I read it in a book. I'm telling you this information because I have made every financial mistake in every financial book you could think of, and then when I ran out of those, I invented my own financial mistakes. So my goal here is, I hope you learn from my stupidity so you don't make the mistakes that I did. So back to this book for a second. This, I'll let him teach you about finances, but the first step in this book is what I want you to knock out before you get to your $5,000 car, because I want you to have a safety net. I want you to have some cash in the bank, because invariably when something does go wrong, you're going to have cash and not go to a credit card. So get the book. Let's put that aside. And the third thing here is, and this is another one of these come to Jesus moments you're going to have with yourself, you have to ask yourself what your risk tolerance is. Yes, if you're probably watching this show, you're probably a car guy or a car gal and you want the coolest car possible. But you've got to be honest, in this stage of your life where you're sacrificing to get some other goal, what's your risk tolerance? Meaning, do you want no risk? Do you want the most reliable car in the world? Or are you willing to put up with a little pain in order to have a cooler car? So, A, no risk. B, cooler but some risk. Then, once we segment into those two areas, we can start coming up with a list. Okay, now that we got the boring stuff out of the way, let's have some fun and start picking out some cars. However, before we get to the main event, let's work on that low risk list. Let's look at the pragmatic, the practical, whatever you want to call it. In this list, ain't gonna surprise no one. Toyota, Honda, and it surprises me that in 2017, some of you still resist the charms, the very reliable and long warranty charms of Hyundais and Kias. And the reason why I say that is, these are great. Not mad at these things at all, as well as Hondas, but you are going to get a lot more for your money in a used Hyundai or Kia than you are in a Toyota or a Honda. Before I switched on the camera here, did a little research last night, and I'm still in Oregon, if you couldn't tell, it's very green. And I looked at both here in Oregon as well as down in LA, and invariably what I saw was Toyotas and Hondas for the same class of vehicle were about 10 to as much as 30% higher in the cost of a used vehicle. Now, let's put that aside and let's focus on something very important. Once you've decided whether it's going to be let's take the Toyota Prius as an example. Now the Prius, you're never going to get me to suggest a Prius. However, if your grandmother is coming to you looking for a used car to spend $5,000, you would be hard-pressed to find a better choice, and here's why. That car has been proven in the hardest use case in the world as a New York City taxi since like 2007 or 8. And I get in those things and always ask the drivers about the maintenance issues. And these things have 200,000 to 400,000 miles on them now, and they're still going and no battery issues. So a great selection, but once you decide on a car like a Prius, what are you looking for? Well, first and foremost, you need to get as low mileage as possible, as low mileage as you can afford. Granted, you're probably looking at me like, oh my God, Captain Obvious, but as low mileage as you can afford. You're not going to find a 30,000 mile car unless you're buying it from your grandmother. And then second, and this is something that also kind of Captain Obvious, at a $5,000 price point, it's going to be hard to avoid a car that's been in an accident, but really spend some time understanding what's going on. If it's just a panel that's been painted, no big deal. Frame, just run. And then last but not least, this is not a hard and fast rule, but it's worked very well for me. Try to buy the car from a private party in a good neighborhood. And here's why. When you go to a private party in a good neighborhood, you're generally buying the car from the first owner, and he or she is really excited about the car, and it's not just selling the car to get the money, they're almost passing on like a family friend, and they want to like interview you to make sure you are the right buyer for the car. And in that process, you learn a lot more about how they use the car and how it was taken care of. Like in every case that I bought a car from a good neighborhood, I got all the records for it. So again, not hard and fast rule, but a great thing to look for. Now, one hint advice here. You have not heard me say the term Nissan throughout this episode yet, and it's not because I'm mad at Nissans or that they're unreliable. They're actually very reliable. However, there's one thing about the show you don't know about me. In addition to the on-camera stuff that I do some speaking engagements. So for advertising agencies, advertising associations, banks, and institutional investors, we talk about the trends of the industry, but I also get feedback from them. So specifically the last two groups that I talked about, those are the guys that manage huge tranches of bundled up used car loans. So they see a lot of the trending, like for example, they don't finance used Range Rovers for obvious reasons. But one of the trends that they're starting to see is failure rates are starting to go up on Nissans with CVT, specifically the transmission itself. So if you're into a Nissan, because Nissan, very reliable product, but if it had a CVT, I would look elsewhere or look for a Nissan with a manual transmission. Now, a little backstory here. I've already been through this rodeo, and I shared with you the details of it in that episode where we talked about how to buy a $150,000 sports car on Dave Ramsey principles. So rather than me rehashing that I bought a $3,500 Pontiac Fiero and using cash over a number of cars, turned it into a brand new Lotus Elise, I'll link it up here and click on that. And you can see not only the cars I chose, but pictures of the very cars I owned.